Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your host, Golden Zulu. So today we'll look at one of the applications of integration, which is consumer surplus. So when we are dealing with consumer surplus, we are always guided by one formula, which is the integral of where Q is of this kind, where you always integrate the demand function, dq, and you subtract the rectangle. So this is the formula which we are always guided with when we are dealing with consumer surplus. So let us have one question. We see how we determine consumer surplus using integration and how we graph the consumer surplus equations. So we have one question there which reads to say, calculate the consumer surplus for the demand function when the market price P is equal to 12. So we will add more information. We will also graph the demand function. So what we do here is we will first start by calculating the value of Q when P is equal to 12. So this is how we calculate the value of P. So we know to say the demand function is given to be P is equal to 60 minus 2Q. Remember, they have said where P is equal to what? 12. So you get this 12 and put where there is P. Remember, equals simply means same. So 12 is equal to 60 minus 2Q. From here, you group the like terms. So it will be 60 minus 12 is equal to 2Q. So when you subtract 60 minus 12, you get your answer to be 48 is equal to 2Q. We are finding the value of Q, so divide both sides by 2, where you get your answer to be 24. So this is the value of Q when P is equal to 12. So now, having calculated the value of Q, we know to say we are told to calculate the consumer surplus, where remember the formula is above there. So we know to say the value of Q is 24. We are referring from the origin. In this case, the down part of the integral is always a 0. Then from here, the demand function was given to be 60 minus 2Q minus P0 and Q0. In this case, they're talking about 12 times 24. So having done that, we now integrate this, and we have known how to integrate. So we will just go directly to the point where the integral of 60 minus 2Q is 60Q minus 2Q squared over 2. And we know to say 12 times 24 is 288. Having done this, we know to say the value of Q is 24 and the other is 0. Where we know to say 0 doesn't change anything, so we will just work with 24. So we'll just go directly here by having 60 open bracket 24 minus 2 and 2 can cancel. We'll have 24 to the power 2 minus 288. So having done that, we now know to say 60 times 24 is 1040. And we know to say 24 times 24 is 576 minus 288. Then from there, we can just go directly by subtracting 1440 minus 576 minus 288, and we get our answer to be 576. So this 576 is the consumer surplus. So having done that, we now graph that equation. So the way you will graph that equation, remember, when you look at it nicely, that is an equation of a straight line. So we'll draw our axis, where we have this one to be our y-axis, and our y-axis, when we are looking at consumer and producer surplus, we have it to be the price, and the x-axis, we have it to be the quantity. So having done that, we will now solve for Q when P is equal to 0. So we solve for Q when P is equal to 0. So we'll put 0 where there is P, and you will get your answer to be 60 minus 2Q is equal to 0. So 60 is equal to 2Q, and you will get the value of Q to be what? 30. You now solve for P when Q is 0. So if you put 0 directly here where there is this, you will get your answer to be P is equal to 60. So having now known to say we have solved for Q when P was 0, so we'll say 30,0, and you solved for P when Q is 0, so you say 0,60. Then remember, these are coordinates, so you will now work with them. Where you not say 0,60, let's estimate to say it is somewhere there. Then after estimating that it is somewhere there, we now estimate again on the x-axis to say 30 is somewhere here. Then having done that, you will now join these 2 points using a straight line. Having done this, we know to say in the statement we were given the price of P to be what? 12. So let's estimate that 12 is where? Here. And when we calculated for Q using 12, you got your quantity to be 24. So you will draw a straight line in dotted or liquid form, where now it has hit the graph. Here you will have your 24. Then remember, when we are dealing with the calculation of consumer surplus, we always calculate the area under the curve minus the area of the rectangle. So in this case, the area under the curve for the consumer surplus is this one. So this one is the consumer surplus. We'll as well calculate the consumer surplus for this demand function, where we have such kind of function, and these are called hyperbolic functions, where we look at them in another chapter. So we are told to say calculate the consumer surplus for the demand function P is equal to 100 over Q plus 2 when the market price is P is equal to 20. So the way we will now calculate the consumer surplus, we use the same method which we were using earlier. Nothing has changed. So this is how we calculate the consumer surplus. Remember, the first thing we had to do is we had to find the value of Q when P is given as stated there. So this is how we go about in calculating the consumer surplus when P is equal to 20. So we are given to say P is equal to 100 over Q plus 2. Remember that we are calculating the value for Q when P is 20. So put your 20 here is equal to 100 over Q plus 2. Where now from here we'll just cross multiply. So 20 Q plus 2 is equal to 100. Then divide both sides by 20. So Q plus 2 is equal to 20 into 100. It is giving you 5. And you know to say, if you were to group the like terms, the value of Q will be 3. So now that the value of Q has been known, you know to say, here you will always put what is referred to as the demand function, dx minus PQ, like that. So where you not say the demand function, in this case of this one, it is 100 over Q plus 2 minus, where P, the one we were given, is 20, and the one we are from finding in this case, which is the Q, is the 3. Then remember, we are supposed to integrate this, and you know to say the integral of this is 100 ln Q plus 2. So we know to say 20 times 3, that is 60. Then, having done this, remember we said the value of Q known to be 3, we always start from the origin. In this case, we have a what there? A 0. So we now know to say, we just go directly with replacing. So we have 100. So we just go directly, we say ln, where remember the value of Q in this case, which is 3 plus 2, minus ln, the value of Q is 0 down, plus 2, minus 60. Having done this, we know to say ln 5. Ln 5 is 1.609, and we know to say ln 2, it is 0.693 minus 60. Having done that, you just now subtract 1.609 minus 0.693. 0.693, you get your answer to be 0.916. Multiply it with 100, getting your answer to be 916 minus 60. And when you subtract, remember we have just multiplied that, so you get your answer to be 91.6. And when you subtract 91.6, you get your answer to be 31.6. So this is the consumer surplus. Then how do you graph this one? So the way you graph this one is just the same as we were doing with the other function. You will draw your axis. So having drawn our axis there, we know to say the demand function we were given is this. So we will solve for the points of intersection where we have our P and our Q here. Just get our 0 and our 0 here, where you know to say you will find the value of Q when P is 0. So when P is 0, you'll find your function, your Q value to be invalid here. You can't find it at any cost. So if you can't find the value of Q when P is 0, then Q will be your asymptote. Remember, the asymptote is the line where it can't be touched, but the graph will continue going to increment, but will never be 0. And you will find the value of P when Q is what? 0, of which you will find the value to be what? 50. So having find our value to be 50, we now know to say, we will estimate to say the 50 is here. Here we don't have any value. So you will just start from here, then it will go, but it will never touch the X axis, in this case being the quantity and the Y axis being the price. Where remember we were told to say that the price was 20 in the first place, and when we used 20, we got our answer to be 3. So the consumer surplus is there. So this is the consumer surplus. Thank you, your host, Golden Zulu.